Hey, this is Retro Nerd Girl, and this is a segment from my interview with Douglas A. Burton, the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth. I have with me the wonderful Douglas A. Burton, and he is here to explain his wonderful book and also explain the theory behind the book, The Heroine's Labyrinth. And it is really, when I first heard about this, maybe about a year ago, I want to say, really blew my mind because I was like, here's something really good. I think we all pretty much know about the hero's journey, but this is a new kind of thing that you've discovered, right, Doug? That will help writers as they're writing their stories. Can you explain more?
Yes, it will help writers organize their story the same way that the hero's journey has all these years. And it's not something I invented. It's something I discovered, a set of patterns that are in stories that I found by studying heroine-centric novels, films, TV shows, even comic books. I found these patterns in there. And the reason I did all this was because I was writing a novel, a historical fiction novel about a Byzantine Empress Theodora, and I used the hero's journey, which I totally believe in and had studied for 25 years, or however long it was. I knew it through and through. Like retro, I love movies. I love books. So I would sit in front of, all the way back into the 80s, I would sit in front of a television with my VHS tapes and I would hit pause and write down notes to see what's working or not working in a movie. And when I discovered the hero's journey, it was like the lights went on. I was like, oh, this magical set of patterns hidden inside Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or the Matrix. You know, it's fascinating and thrilling to observe these patterns play out in stories. So when I went to write Faraway Bird, I just blindly trusted the hero's journey. And it did not work. And this really bothered me because I had no other option. If the hero's journey doesn't work, you're done. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I know. I'll just look for the feminine version. And I found a lot of things, but none of them were what I really was looking for, which was something as concise, as easy to understand, and as recognizable. When I watch a movie or read a book that I'm like, oh, there it is. I wanted that, and it wasn't there. So I just started my own studies to help me finish my novel. Yeah. And I found all these new patterns, and I was getting excited because I was like, this is not the hero's journey. This is totally different. And the notes, as I began to share them and other people began to get excited, became what would become the Heroine's Labyrinth. A completely different storytelling framework with which to organize or understand stories. It's a perspective. You can look and see it, get a completely new interpretation of how a story is put together.
When I learned about this, because I myself was doing a lot of the same things, and that's what kind of inspired this channel, was basically breaking down, figuring out why I loved certain stories and why they worked, and why did I like certain characters, and maybe some other characters that were similar just didn't match up. Just finding your talks, they were really hitting a chord with me. Like following the things that you have to say, I'm like, wow, I can see it now in so many really great movies and stories, just stories in general. So we're gonna take a look.
All right.
This is Doug's book, and it is available on Amazon right now. Is really awesome. I got my copy. So yes, just really excited to have my copy here and going through everything. And we're actually gonna go bit by bit through the archetypes that you mentioned in the Heroine's Labyrinth.
Yes.
And this is a wonderful little diagram that you kind of showed of the process of the labyrinth.
Right. So like I said, I am a believer in the hero's journey. I am not anti-hero's journey. I have not turned against it. I don't think it's obsolete. I don't think that it's something that you should dismiss if you're a storyteller. I think you should take it seriously and have it available to consider and use for your story.
Yes.
However, if you, like me, run into a situation where that is not the right model and you're really pulling a muscle to try to shoehorn your story into the hero's journey, it may not work. I've read blogs where memoirists are very frustrated with the hero's journey because they're like, I didn't really have a departure. I guess I went to college, so it sort of works, but then it sort of doesn't. And, it just wasn't the right model. So this model I found in a shocking number of stories, all the way, from Jane Eyre, from the Bible to Barbie, the Terminator, Aliens, a lot of heroine-centric stories. And retro, we've taught some of our favorite heroines.
Oh, yeah.
Are in these movies or these books or these stories where this model plays out. And once you identify it or see it, it's harder to miss. Like the hero's journey. Like you're like, oh man, there's the single. When Neo turns to fight Agent Smith and they're facing each other, you're like, oh, here we go.
Yes.
So you recognize the moments. They're archetypal.
Yeah.
When I started studying heroine-centric stories, my initial thought was I was looking at it as a modification of the hero's journey. And I found it for two reasons. One, I thought there was a mistake. I noticed that a lot of heroines didn't have what's called the refusal of the call, which is a lot of heroes will balk famously when they're offered the chance for the adventure that they've been wanting. Something like, here's the call to adventure. And the hero's like, on second thought, no. I could take you as far as Anchorhead.
Yeah.
And Ben calls him out. He's like, that's your uncle talking, you not wanting adventure all of a sudden. So I noticed that a lot of heroine-centric stories didn't have this refusal of the call. And I also noticed that they skipped many heroine-centric stories, the symbolic death, the disgrace of the hero. You rarely see heroines in a Luke Skywalker situation hanging off the bottom of Cloud City. Why are they skipping these steps? And I decided those steps were essential for the warrior hunter arc. The hero is being prepared for his possible destruction. And so he must experience something.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yes, right. So the reason the hero refuses the call is because he could get annihilated. You must learn the ways of the Force if you're to come with me to Alderaan. That's not just a call to adventure. That is Luke leaving his native culture and subjecting himself to the might and power of the Empire, in which he could be destroyed in this. So heroes better think twice before answering that call. So when heroines weren't, and they skipped the symbolic death, I began to think, well, maybe there's something different that's not a warrior or a hunter type of arc there, that's something different. And I got the idea while listening to a great courses with Professor or Dr. Hannah B. Harvey. She was discussing Little Red Riding Hood and all the variations of this fairy tale, and how the fable is meant to prepare the heroine to go from girlhood to womanhood, which in a woman's life is a day. It happens on a very specific day. Yeah, it doesn't happen like that for guys. Some say we never grow up. But it's a pretty dramatic moment because the outside world is going to treat you differently after, and that's why that's why it's red. It's a red cape for a reason. She goes to a house. There's a wolf in disguise. She didn't go way off into some foreign land. It's in her grandmother's house. It's supposed to be a safe place.
Yes.
And the beast is it's a terrible villain, and he's in disguise, and he wants to eat Little Red Riding Hood. And it was supposed to represent masculine forces. It's in a bed. It's there for a reason. And it's to teach young heroines about the dangers of big bad wolves out there and protect it. And I was listening to this and I was like, that is totally archetypal. And it's not in the hero's journey. That's really not a hero's journey. Hero's journeys aren't preparation for womanhood. It's not on safe home ground. So at that point, I began to think maybe there's something completely different with the heroine. Maybe there's something different that they're going through. And at this point in my life, or in my research, yes, there is a different model, and it's fundamentally different. It's existentially different, and it's identified. You can recognize it yourself when you see these stories.
Yeah, and another thing too to just bring up about Little Red Riding Hood, this is a great story, and so to find that in there and apply it to what you're developing here. Now that you've explained it, I see it.
Yes.
Yeah. Now that you've explained it, I see it.
It's there. The heroine's problem in Little Red Riding Hood is she fails to spot the disguise of the beast, of the wolf.
Yes.
What big teeth you have, what big claws, she's slow to discover that this is not her grandmother. This is someone in disguise. Yes. And depending on the variant of the story, she gets eaten or she escapes. But there's a warning there for our heroines. There's a distinct warning, and it's not the kind of warning you get on the hero's journey. Nor did she refuse the call. She was eager to go to grandma's house. She sings her song, yeah. She's got her picnic. She's happy to be there. So, and then we also see Little Red Riding Hood reborn in Dorothy Gale, in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, in Bella Swan from the Twilight series, Clarice Starling. It's crazy. You think about it. Hannibal eats people like the big bad wolf.
Oh,
and Buffalo Bill wears cheap clothing. He disguises himself in a suit. So I was like, there's a heroine with 1,000 faces. So I was like, all right, now it's time to let's look at this and let's find other things that are happening that might be different and let go of the hero's journey and look with fresh eyes at these stories.
On this, I would say this is a map, right?
Kind of. It's a snapshot.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's
to help writers. And by the way, just like the hero's journey, not every story requires every step. I used tarot cards to head each chapter to give the reader/writer a different view of structure, because tarot cards you flip over and they could be in a different order. It could be upside down or right side up. And they're archetypal. They're archetypal images that you must now interpret and organize into a story.
Yes.
You're trying to see the future or make a reading, but you have to be mindful of the story you're telling.
Yeah.
It has to make sense to the person or yourself reading the tarot card. So
yes.
Each chapter has like a tarot card header. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they're fantastic, by the way. I love those tarot card illustrations. They're beautiful.
So the way this is laid out, it's to give writers a chance to kind of see how the 3-act structure might work in a heroine's labyrinth model. The main distinction that I found between heroine-centric stories and the hero's journey stories are there often was no departure and no return. Not from and to and from the native culture. Most heroines tend to stay in their native culture.
Okay.
So a fundamental distinction is an inward journey in and within the native culture rather than a departure from it. That's fundamentally different because the journey itself takes on different meaning. And that's why it's not just a different version of the hero's journey. It's fundamentally different because psychologically, mentally, archetypally, what the conflict is so distinct from the kind of conflict that the hero on the journey will face. Often external threats, wilderness survival, combat, athleticism. I mean, you got to do a lot to survive out when you leave the native culture, whereas competency is a big one for the hero's journey. Which, not to say that heroines aren't competent, but there's different focuses on different attributes for the heroine. Like intuition is a big one in the heroine's labyrinth. So the first act of the heroine's labyrinth is what I call orientation or immersion, in which the heroine is enculturated. She learns about the culture. She learns what the do's and don'ts are. She learns the rules and the expectations. There might be gender roles. Oh, we don't do that here. Don't say that. Don't be seen doing this. There's very specific guidelines that the heroine is meant to follow. And the labyrinth is what I would consider a socio-cultural metaphor, a conflict metaphor for the heroine and her society. These are the invisible rules that keep her kind of directed in one direction or another. And what's amazing, like in that video, is that this manifests itself into actual labyrinths all the time, which you could see in movies. And that's how often you see heroines in the maze trying to get out. So the metaphor becomes real in a lot of these stories. But even in the absence of a physical labyrinth, it's very easy to see how culture itself can be labyrinthine and a source of conflict for the heroine. You're dealing with people who you know. They speak the same language. They, live in your town. They know your parents, or they are your parents. There's some levels of trust that are inherent when you are a part of a community. So that's what I'm saying. The conflicts with people you know and trust, or people who speak the same language, or, have similar views as you, or something similar as a background, live in the same time as you do. That kind of a conflict is psychologically very different from me departing and maybe getting into a bar fight or slaying an orc on the trail. It's just fundamentally different in terms of the conflict.
Well, at the start of this, so we start at Act 1, and does it always have to be in this order, or can any of these attributes show up at different times in the story? Okay, so but this is sort of like what you generally think it should go in these specific acts.
Right. For me to present it, I was like, it's still important for me to choose an order that I think may be the most common, or the most logical. However, stories break away from this logical progression all the time. In fact, I've just started creating lists where I map out the order in which these archetypes appear in different stories. Like the unmasking, which I have in Act 3. In Aliens, it happens a little bit earlier. She unmasks Carter Burke, and there's still a lot of the story to go. But in most stories, the unmasking will take place a lot closer to the end, like Entangled. Mother Gothel, okay, so now I'm the bad guy. She's unmasked late. And in most stories, there's a late unmasking. But so I gave the best order I could. But I just want to stress that often when you study stories, you're like, oh, that's the captivity bargain. Oh, that's Barbie.
Yes.
It happens late. And the Black Swan, which we'll get into, I've seen that take place all over in stories. So I just put it in Act 1, because Act 1 was the only one with 5 instead of 6. So once I put it in Act 1, each stage had 6, so it balanced it out.
I'm quite partial to the Black Swan. I like that. That's my favorite one.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it was the last one, because it was the one that I was having the most trouble making sense of. But the more I understand it, the more it's becoming my favorite as well. Okay, so we're going to go by each one of these attributes, or what you call archetypes is what you the language you use. Designs or archetypal events.
And so we'll start off at the beginning, and the first one that you have here is the masked minotaur. So
the first one's actually the Labyrinth, which is the whole picture.
Okay. Okay. So the whole thing, just the labyrinth itself, the world.
Right. That's technically the first archetypal design, which is an inward journey within the native culture. No departure, no return. You are staying there. You're going to be dealing with this. If you run into problems or have conflicts, you're likely going to stay with the people who have seen you fail, who saw you make the mistake, who have stigmatized you, and now you're like in the Scarlet Letter. She stays amongst these people, wearing the Scarlet Letter. So that's the first archetypal design, the sociocultural labyrinth, which could also be the fantastic labyrinth. I actually believe Wizard of Oz follows more of a labyrinth model. If you look at it, it's like a two-dimensional maze.
I noticed that right away.
Yeah.
I was like, the Wizard of Oz, absolutely.
Yeah. Of course, there's a hero's journey interpretation of Wizard of Oz, which is perfectly applicable. But there is also a heroine's labyrinth interpretation as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to let everybody know, again, the hero's journey and the heroine's labyrinth can work excellently together, right?
And they often do.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a wonderful little storytelling, I would say, device that you could use, apply if you're a writer, but also notice if you're a film lover, or just a story person who just loves stories. You can then notice it in all of your favorite stories, and it's really wonderful. So after the Labyrinth, what's next?
And this is where I'm saying, once you really identify the inward journey as distinctive in and of itself,
Okay.
you begin to notice changes across the board elsewhere, like the villain. So we discussed the distant dragon in the hero's journey, a militant, alien, foreign, insect-like, machine-like outsider that is there to subjugate or annihilate the native culture. And this dragon must be slain. And the hero is brave to go attempt this, by the way. That's usually not the kind of villain heroines face in their stories. Okay. Heroines face an archetypally different villain type, which I call the masked minotaur. The minotaur is a perfect archetype for him. He is half man, half animal. He has the torso, arms, and mind in some ways of a man, and the head, tail, and feet of an animal, of a bull. And it's a cursed creature. The animal savage side of the minotaur is the dominant side of the masked minotaur. The humanity often is brought into service to the masked minotaur. So they're duplicitous, half man, half beast, which means in story terms, the minotaur has an outward, benevolent, friendly, social apex veneer, but secretly they have a tyrannical, oppressive, cruel side that they hide from society. So people don't know this about the minotaur. And for those who do know it, they can't do much about it because the disguise of the minotaur holds up in public. So people don't see the tyrannical side. They see only the benevolent outer self. And you'll see this everywhere. Cal Hotley in Titanic, tuxedo, he's charming and dashing, but he's telling Rose, he's offering her the Hope Diamond in one scene, and the next scene he's striking her in the face and telling her, "You will be my wife." Right? So two very different sides of this man.
Yes.
He's a perfect masked minotaur. Immortan's Joe in Mad Max Fury Road. He's the leader of the culture, but he's also the oppressor, and he gathers brides like cattle. President Snow in Hunger Games, the wizard in Wizard of Oz. They're all disguised. Yeah. All of these guys, they're all disguised. Buffalo Bill, hidden in society. She cannot see him. She thinks he's like the friendly average neighbor when she meets him. You name it, the villain is disguised. That is a very difficult type of creature or villain to defeat. You don't just walk up with a sword. You don't just slay him in combat. He's a member of your native culture, often beloved or esteemed or respected. And so attacking this individual could actually backfire on you.
Yes.
So very difficult for heroines to deal with this. The minotaur is usually able to muster social forces against the heroine. And so, like Frozen, he's the charming suitor Prince Hans.
Oh, yeah.
He's dashing and it sets up like a Disney romance, and then you find out this guy's terrible.
Yeah,
he's in disguise. So the masked minotaur appears so often in hero-centric stories. Once you see it, you'll notice them everywhere. They're not Thanos. They're not the Emperor. Those villains are out in the open. They're not disguised.
Yeah,
they're like, "Hey, I'm here to. I'm going to wipe you out, bro." Come at me. And the hero does. So it's a different villain that the heroines are up against.
The idea of villain has always been kind of grouped into one big category, and this that kind of separates villains out a little bit, and especially the ones that are secretly pretending to be the nice guy, where they're really like Burke and
Burke
Aliens.
Is a masked minotaur. So is Ash in Aliens. They both have esteem in the culture. In the group that they're in, they appear to be friendly. We were talking about it last night. Burke appears to be on Ripley's side early in the film. He's the one who pushes Gorman out of the way. You had your chance, Gorman. Ash is the science officer. He appears to be very helpful to the group. And then you slowly see the clues that there's a mask there. And he's willing to kill the crew, as is Burke, to get what he wants. That's the calling card of the Minotaur, that they will go to extreme lengths to get the things they want. And their animal, that savage animal self, is dominant Beauty and the Beast sets you up perfectly. Gaston is the social apex guy. He's the big, strong guy. The girls swoon. The guys want to be like him. And Beast looks beastly. He's awful. You know, but at the end, who's the guy who can't let go? Who becomes the tyrant?
Yeah.
Gaston is unmasked.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and of course, like these were talking about some of the most incredible villains that are in stories. They're so good, and they're just so many. As you just think about it, just so many characters that fill that particular persona. And also, would you say that in Terminator 2 that the T-1000?
Yeah, he's disguised as a police officer throughout the film, which is an esteemed role in society. You know, he's got authority. You know, when he's asking about John, she tells him. She's not, you know, what do you do now, officer?
Yeah, people trust him immediately.
Right, trust because he's in disguise. In fact, he's a very specific type of Minotaur, which I call a shapeshifter, which is different from the first disguised Terminator in Terminator 1.
Yes.
His disguise is a normal person.
Yeah,
he's passing through society, but you see the mask of humanity come off physically in Terminator, and you see the machine tyrant underneath, slowly but surely. Oof. So yeah, Terminator totally has, and that's Heroine centric. Totally has masked Minotaurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're talking about all my favorites.
I know, me too. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm thrilled about this because it gives me a new lens to look through to watch these stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we've gone through the Minotaur, let's talk about the next one on your list.
Right. So the Sacred Fire is one of the most important and the most complex, because I had to ask myself, at some point, I keep seeing the Minotaur try to capture the heroine constantly over in every freaking story. I'm like, man, someone is after the heroine. They do not want her to go. They are tough on her. They're not, you know, it's almost like obsessive behavior over the heroines by the masked Minotaur. And at some point I was like, why? And at first you have obvious answers. Well, she's beautiful, but so are a lot of women, right? So are a lot of characters in these stories. Why her? Why is he obsessed for her? And then it's like, you know, also Eros, you know, the sexuality of the heroine. Maybe he just really, you know, really desires her. But it's like, but again, why her? Why is it obsessive with this one heroine, this one character? I solved it when I thought of the Sacred Fire. Have you ever seen Quest for Fire?
Yes. Okay, it's been a while, but I've seen it.
Right. You remember there's like these, like, they're kind of funny now. That doesn't hold up as well, but they're like dressed as cavemen. Yeah. And they have this fire. Yeah. And they have, one guy has to keep it burning through the night, and this other like rival tribe of cavemen comes up and tries to steal the fire. Then they chase it, and then they try to relocate but keep the flame lit. And I was like, man, these guys are crazy over the fire. I was like, they're crazy over the fire. I was like, so I decided it's best to, and you'll notice this everywhere once I point it out. Imagine your heroine as carrying a sacred flame inside her, like she's holding a flame. It is part of her personality. It is part of her essence, and it is what the masked Minotaur is trying to capture in her. And it blinds him. He's mesmerized by the sacred fire, and that's why he wants to possess her, monopolize her time and energy. He doesn't want to let her go. You'll always notice the masked Minotaur when the heroine attempts to leave. You know, when Rose is like, you know, I'd rather be his whore than your wife. Cal's like, that, he pulls out a pistol. He becomes murderous. He chases her down. Mad Max Fury Road, the entire culture comes after Fury Road.
Yes.
Thelma and Louise, the entire police force is chasing her down. So there's an obsessive behavior there. And I decided they are after the sacred fire of the heroine. Secondly, and this fire motif takes on several layers. The sacred fire is also burning bright in the heroine. It is what she cares about most. It could be her cause. It could be her passion. It could be love. It could be her eros, her own sexuality. It could be creative abilities. Whatever it is that she loves, her passion, that is her sacred fire. That is also what the Minotaur will find mesmerizing about her. The sacred fire has two dimensions that I broke this down into. Two. One I call the beautiful force. And this is what attracts people to the heroine. It is when her sacred fire is burning bright, whatever it is, people will be attracted to it. And one of these people will be a masked minotaur, hopefully not more. But one of them will be drawn in and they will not want to let go, okay? And there's a third component. The heroine's sacred fire comes from somewhere. And it's most usually characterized by her family. So there's a larger communal fire of which one branch is pulled out of the communal fire from the bonfire, and it's handed to the heroine, and she's holding it. The culture knows this. We see sacred flames elsewhere. We see them in synagogues, war memorials, tomb sites. And the idea is that it's like an eternal flame, right? Mm-hmm. So the native culture wants the heroine to use this sacred fire a certain way. From a primal sense, they want the continuation of the culture itself. Have children, carry on the family name. Oh. That's the primal origin, I think, of this continuity. So the native culture wants continuity with that sacred fire. And that is why the native culture is very tough on heroines. They steer her toward very specific things. They don't want her to mess this up. The heroine has her own designs. She wants to do something with her sacred fire independent of everybody else. And then you have the masked minotaur who claims the sacred fire. You have three claimants. The heroine makes her claim, the native culture makes its claim, and the masked minotaur makes his claim. That is the heroine's conflict triangle in almost all these stories. It's amazing.
Yeah, like the Terminator for sure. Like,
totally.
You see those three.
Totally. Sarah Connor, her job is to keep humanity alive. She has the sacred flame of humanity inside of her. If she dies, the idea is that the sacred flame of humanity goes out. Her native culture is destroyed. So she must carry this flame and protect that flame. She also has her own sacred fire. In Sarah's, it becomes maternal. She wants to protect John. Now, my argument is that if John was a tax accountant, she would protect this guy.
Yes.
But he's the leader of the revolution. So, she has this other thing. And then, of course, the Terminator is after her, and he wants that sacred fire doused from the timeline.
Oh, yeah.
So there's your conflict triangle. When Sarah has nightmares, it is of nuclear Armageddon. She's not dreaming of John dying. She's afraid that she'll let the native culture down.
Yeah.
The native culture's claim upon her. Save us, Sarah.
Yeah.
So the sacred fire is a very important one. So I mentioned there was the two dynamics. One is the beautiful force. The thing that attracts others to the heroine. It could be her mind. It could be her artwork. It could be her beauty. It could be all sorts of things. But it could be her personality. It could be her ideas on science. Doesn't matter. It's what attracts people. The other is what I call a creative power. The heroine often has a creative power. I think primally it is the ability to create life. And that's why the maternal angle will often work well in these stories. However, it could be anything. It could be an artistic ability, anything creative, anything that's constructive and useful to society, anything that's beautiful, that is constructive, is the creative power part of the heroine. So those combine for her sacred fire, and often the heroine claims her sacred fire early in the story, which then triggers the native culture to come in and say, hold your horses. We have plans for you. And it's not that. And then that's also when the Minotaur will make his claim. A great movie that has all three claims like perfect is in Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, yes.
The opening number. Belle is like, she's claiming her sacred fire in that song. That's why these songs are so easy to love.
Yes.
She wants more in life. We recognize that. And she's like, I want more than this provincial life. That's her claiming her sacred fire. She reads books. She's learned and intellectual and wants more. The native culture in the same song, it's written into the lyrics. Oh, there goes Belle. She's a weird one. She's always got her nose in a book. They're talking about her nonconformity to the native culture, which they disapprove of. So they wish she would conform. That's the native culture trying to put Belle in check.
Yes.
And then the song concludes with the masked Minotaur making his claim. There goes Belle. she's going to be my wife. He hasn't even met her yet, right?
Yeah.
He's not in love with Belle. He just wants to possess her. All three claimants have made their claim in that opening number, and it's picture perfect.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah. I do adore how this just slides right into the story, and it fits. It works. It's a formula. It's a formula, but it's not like so rigid as a formula.
Right.
You know what
exactly.
I mean? It's free flowing, but also it's just seems to be working as you're explaining this.
Well, that's why I call them archetypal designs, because I was trying to get away from a rigid pattern and to something that these manifest in our dreams. You know, my definition of an archetype is something people can recognize even in a dream. Do you ever wake up from a dream and you try to explain it to somebody and the emotion is so strong, you recognize something that you didn't even think of? It just auto-populated from your psyche.
Yes,
you know?
yes, definitely. I get those dreams all the time.
Those are awesome. So that's the sacred fire that creates the conflict dynamic for the heroine,
and that is really very important to the story. I mean, without that sacred fire, can you really have a story without the sacred fire?
Heroes actually have a sacred fire as well. I'll just say that in most stories, it's different. It's totally different the way it plays out. The fire for the hero can either be illuminating and creative, or it can be destructive and burn things to the ground.
Ooh.
And so the ethics of force become an issue for hero journey stories. Karate Kid, Luke Skywalker, the dark side of the force, light side, Miyagi-Do, Cobra Kai. You get this sort of dichotomy for heroes that is largely missing. You don't get the ethics of force in a lot of heroine-centric stories, but you do get this obsessive behavior by the Minotaur toward the heroine and trying to monopolize it. Like, I was even watching the trailer to Super Mario Brothers recently, the newer movie, and there's a picture of Princess Peach, and she holds out her hand, and a big flame appears in her hand, and I was like, oh, there it is again, the sacred fire. You see the symbolism over and over again.
Yeah, also in Krull, that the princess has a sacred fire in her hand.
And Ripley, her sacred fire is maternity in Aliens. And when she goes in to save Newt, which is she carries the sacred flame on the end of a flamethrower.
And so getting to the next one, the captivity bargain.
And these will go quicker, I promise. But
that's fine, because I think we needed to get into deep discussion on those two, because they're really the main setup, would you say?
Right. Yeah. These are the structural components that are new, that are so different that I had to rethink. That's why there's different terms. And if you understand the differences to the archetypal design, these others start to move a little easier. You'll understand them better.
Okay.
So the captivity bargain, the captive princess we see everywhere.
Yes.
And it's not a mistake. We see Sarah Connor in the mental facility in Terminator 2. We see Princess Fiona in the tower in the classic, in Shrek. Ripley is stripped of her license. Barbie, great captivity bargain in Barbie.
Oh, yeah.
They ask her to get in the box, and she goes, and the twisty ties almost go right around her wrists. So the captivity bargain, put simply, is we just heard that there's 3 claims on the heroine: the native culture, the heroine, and the masked minotaur. Early in the story, the heroine will attempt to reconcile the chaos this causes. She knows she wants to, Ariel wants to go up there, she wants to be part of their world.
Yes.
King Triton says no. And then there's Ursula. She wants to possess the heroine. She literally is trying to take her soul, symbolized by her voice. So how does the heroine deal with these 3 competing claims that cause disharmony in her world? She makes a captivity bargain. This is not proof that the heroine is weak. This is not proof that she's gullible. It is her attempt to reconcile the 3 competing claims. It's very logical, and it's a bad deal. And we've all made this in our younger days, or in our inexperience. We've all made a bad deal.
Yes.
It's not a good deal. So it's a captivity bargain. Many heroines do this willingly, agree to it willingly, although there is definitely a strain of this where it is absolutely imposed upon the heroine. She doesn't have a choice. But like Barbie, she willingly got in the box for her captivity bargain. She saw the chaos that would, she wants to solve the issue of her like doppelganger in the real world. And Mattel wants, things to go back to normal. There's chaos there. And going back in the box seems to be the way to solve this. So the captivity bargain is the effort by the heroine to restore social order by agreeing to some level of restriction in her society. So here's the hallmarks of the captivity bargain. The heroine usually agrees to the captivity bargain willingly. She loses some degree of freedom within the native culture. The heroine typically makes the captivity bargain to reconcile competing claims to her sacred fire. The captivity often results in the heroine's isolation. And that's a key element. Heroines do not like to be isolated.
Oh, yeah.
The captivity bargain often appears to be a reasonable solution to the heroine's conflicts. The characters who demand, recommend, or present the captivity bargain are often trusted characters or in a position of authority. Another reason why it's easy to believe the heroine agrees to this. And it's often associated with inexperience, immaturity, and innocence. So we will forgive her for this. The reason a lot of modern feminists hate the captivity bargain is because we often end the story through the hero's perspective, in which the captivity bargain is the they lived happily ever after moment for the heroine. We skip the rest of her story. And so we don't know much about her. She's frozen in this immature stage that when there's more to the heroine than this inexperienced stage. So now that I have the heroine's labyrinth, I know now when I see Andromeda chained to the mountain, she's in a very dangerous captivity bargain.
Yes.
Her native culture is not, they're sacrificing her.
Yes.
And here comes Perseus, right? Here comes Perseus. A heroic figure enters her life. This is great news for the heroine, but it doesn't solve her underlying problem. We need the heroine to solve that on her own, whether or not a heroic individual comes in to help the heroine at any point in her story. So a lot of hero's journey stories end where he slays the dragon and saves the princess from the captivity bargain. The hero's journey's over.
Yes.
But the heroine story is technically just getting started. And we just
like in Snow White, right? Like something like
exactly.
Snow White. Yeah.
That's a great one. So my point is you're getting an intersection of monomyths. The heroine's in her early captivity bargain, and here comes the hero from far off to rescue her. He is being heroic by doing this.
Yeah.
But she has not solved her underlying problems. She just made this bargain as a means to solve her underlying problems, but it is an unfavorable deal that she will still have to solve. That's the captivity bargain.
Yeah. And I guess that's probably the also Little Red Riding Hood, if you depends on the version you see, because in some of them there's a hunter that comes in and slays the wolf and frees and frees Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother.
So, you can tell a guy probably said, "What's this story? You know what we need? We need a huntsman to knock this thing out." My whole point is a lot of modern movies are like saying she doesn't need help from anybody to solve. And I'm like, well, I don't know any hero or heroine that doesn't need help. It's good that she solves her underlying problems on her own, but to receive heroic help from heroic partners, absolutely essential for heroines and heroes alike. Luke didn't destroy the Death Star without Han swooping in.
Yeah.
You need help. It's okay for the heroine to get help. The issue, though, is that's not the help isn't the solution to her problems. It is just what I said. It is help.
So the next one is, like I said before, is my favorite, the Black Swan. Explain the Black Swan to everyone.
So the Black Swan is the wild card archetypal design.
Yeah.
And I kept making these notes and I did not know what to do with them. Because it didn't seem to be the hero. Like, you see the logical progression. The heroine goes into her culture. There's struggles there. There's a mass man. All of that seemed to make sense. But the Black Swan seems to come out of nowhere in these stories. And the Black Swan is essentially the sudden destabilization of the heroine's native culture for whatever reason. So here's the list. I call it the anatomy of an archetype, and it kind of breaks them down into bullet points to help writers know what the archetype is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a temporary, destabilizing, or disrupting event that is usually caused by nature, but war is another one.
Yeah.
The most common forms of black swans are famines, pandemics, fires, floods, or other natural disasters. There's a bizarre association between heroines and natural disaster. A military invasion or foreign occupation of the home space may also serve as a black swan. Often includes apocalyptic imagery or severe damage to the home environment. It is bizarre how often this happens. Whether it's Coraline, where the world starts disintegrating at the end as she's solving the puzzles, whether it's Scarlett O'Hara standing there and Atlanta is burning down behind her. You think of Princess Leia, who's the only member in which Alderaan is their native culture. Princess Leia, and she stands there and watches the Death Star blow this thing up. The Black Swan reinforces the heroine's distrust of predictable human conventions. I have found an amazing regularity where heroines just don't believe that the plan has solved it all. Heroines are very skeptical of these sorts of plans, and the Black Swan is like proof that you thought you had this under control. You didn't.
Look at this mess.
The heroine may place trust in randomness or chaos, like we talked about with Ripley. Boom! Fires open that airlock. She could have killed all of them, but she trusted that this would kill the Queen Alien only. That's one example. Moana, the chaotic ocean with Grandma. She plays a chaotic spirit in that throughout the film. And finally, the randomness and chaos of the Black Swan may help or hinder the heroine. So the reason it could come up at any time in Wizard of Oz,
yes,
you see it in Act 1.
Yes.
The tornado comes in, right?
I know, yeah, it's the best.
And then it totally throws her native culture into a hizzy and sends her on her adventure.
Yes.
In Terminator 2, it happens in Act 2. Sarah Connor falls asleep and she sees a nuclear explosion, this apocalyptic imagery of Los Angeles being destroyed in nuclear explosion. And she wakes up.
Yeah.
In the novel, there's movies, but it's really hard to find the movie. But the novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. It happens in Act 3. The heroine is moving along, has this great man that she really found love with named Tea Cake, and a Florida hurricane comes in at the end, crosses Florida, devastates her entire native culture, and actually leads to her Tea Cake getting bit by a dog and getting rabies. So that's the Black Swan in Act 3. This apocalyptic imagery is surprisingly persistent. Again, Gone with the Wind, after the Atlanta is burned to the ground, she enters a famine. Remember, she hoped that famous scene, I'll never go hungry again. It's due to the famine that struck the South after the war. Think of Ripley at the end of Aliens. You now have 3 minutes to read. The world's coming apart. It's destroying. It's destroying itself. And as she's pulling away, there's yet another nuclear explosion on LV-426. So for whatever reason, heroines tend to have worlds destabilize on them, and it can be rather dramatic. And when you look for it, you'll start to see it a lot.
Oh, wow. I I want to write a story where there's like 5 black swans. Can I do that?
Yes, you can. I actually had a sticking point in the story I'm writing right now.
Yeah.
The sequel to Empress Theodora, and I added a black swan. I added an apocalyptic snowstorm that came in and just destroyed the city and ended up having some pretty major consequences to her. So, and by the way, chaos, the association with either women or heroines in chaos, I have actually determined that chaos is not destructive power. It is highly complex patterns that heroines are more in tune with than a lot of their male counterparts in these stories. So a hurricane follows it's a weather pattern. It may have destructive consequences, but it comes from a pattern. Even an explosion follows the laws of physics. So very complex patterns are what heroines are more interested in. They're not interested in the destructive power of chaos. They just know it's possible while a lot of other people, through hubris or ignorance, ignore these complex patterns that can upend things. So you'll also see heroines trust in randomness. Sometimes, like in the Bible, Moses' mother, her native culture turns against her. They want to slay her firstborn baby. She puts him in a river and she lets the randomness of the river take him away. And this proves to be a successful strategy.
Yeah.
So heroines and randomness, heroines and complex patterns or chaos do often appear. And I call it the black swan.
Ah, so great. So great. And the next one that you've got here is the call to adventure.
Call to adventure is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
This would be a narrative device in any structure, because you need something to get the story going. But there is one major difference that I'd like to point out. When the call to adventure comes to the hero and the hero's journey, as we discussed, the hero usually has a refusal of the call. And the heroine usually does not. Heroines actually leap at the chance. The second they get a chance, they tend to leap at it. It's not a mistake in the writing. It's because the call to adventure to the hero could mean his annihilation and death. So the hero thinks twice. Also, once they depart the native culture for the hero's journey, home becomes a desirable place of safe returns. The Shire, Starfleet headquarters, the Batcave, these places where you come home to and you're so happy you made it back. Home is not looked at like this from the heroine's point of view. Home, as we discussed, is very restrictive to them. They are eager to get out and away from supervision and to explore the native culture and to go deeper. So when the heroine gets her call to adventure, she often jumps at the chance. And it's because the threat to her is usually not annihilation. So the threat of death is not really part of the heroine's labyrinth as much as it might be for the hero's journey. So she doesn't have the need to second guess it so much. Think about Barbie, though. She does have a refusal of the call, but what's on her mind? Death. She's thinking about death, so she refuses the call. So there seems to be a correlation between the likelihood of annihilation and the refusal of the call. And with heroine-centric stories, annihilation is not usually what they're worried about. And so the refusal of the call is often skipped. Just an observation. If you want a refusal of the call, ask yourself, how confining is the home environment? The more confining the home environment, the more likely she will jump at the chance to answer the call to adventure. And secondly, the more likely her annihilation is possible by accepting the call to adventure, the more likely she'll refuse the call first. So two ways you can kind of weigh out that call to adventure.
Well, I think of a movie like Mulan. And Mulan may not have necessarily like all of the things, but her call to adventure, she jumps at the opportunity to she creates this opportunity actually for herself to leave.
Moana doesn't need to be like talked out of.
Did I say Moana? I meant
you said Mulan.
Mulan, yes.
I was just saying another example.
Yeah.
You have to put a cage around her to keep her from getting off this island. She's so eager. Wonder Woman, 2017. She storms off the screen. She's so ready to. It's like, we have to do this. She's confined. She's ready to go. Well, and Ripley in Aliens, she does refuse the call.
Yes.
I said no, and I mean it. But
and she has a reason,
she's
right?
afraid of dying.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Death.
So refusal of the call made sense for her.
Yeah.
Jane Eyre, or in Wuthering Heights, like the death isn't really what they're worried about. So they're probably going to jump at the chance to get moving.
So the next one is Cult of Deception.
So that really ends Act 1. That's the orientation phase of the story, the immersion phase, the enculturation of the heroine. We've discovered the labyrinth. There's a minotaur in there who's got a particular focus on the heroine. She's made a captivity bargain to try to organize this conflict. There could be a black swan or not. And she's received the call to adventure, and she likely will take this willingly and rapidly when she gets the opportunity. And that moves her into Act 2, which I call exploration. The exploration phase. She is now going to learn more about her native culture. She's going to go deeper into the native culture. She's not departing. She's going deeper into the native culture. And so The first archetypal design here is called the Cult of Deception. And it's so once she's moving in and she's starting to explore and meet people and just she starts running into characters, I found this bizarre, that redirect or misdirect the heroine. It's so even neutral characters are very unhelpful to heroines. I even found out there's several stories that show heroines getting hit on, right? There's some guy hitting on them. And it becomes like you think of Inglourious Bastards, that Frederick Zoller guy's always hitting on her. Clarice Starling, the guy's like, yeah, it's very pretty. We never get detectives this pretty. And at first, my thought was those are just nuisances, to the heroine. It's a nuisance, but it's more than that. And it's part of the Cult of Deception because this behavior introduces an ulterior motive from characters. Some characters are now redirecting the heroine. She must overcome these redirections in order to get what she wants or to discover what she's looking for or to pass. The Cult of Deception can be a real problem for the heroine as she's as people are covering up a secret. There could be a secret about her identity. People are lying to her, hence the word deception. And I also noticed there's a lot of stories that the heroine is monitored, surveilled in some way. Someone's keeping tabs on her. Ex Machina. He's watching her through all the security cameras. In Labyrinth with David Bowie, you have those eyes remember all those eyes that turn and follow?
Yes.
And the Wicked Witch of the West is watching Dorothy from the crystal ball. There is usually this bizarre, monitoring of the heroine to see where she's going. And this could be a problem as well. Also in Labyrinth, all those little guys come up and they move the arrow tiles. Remember
yes.
They pop up and they change the they're misdirecting her.
Yeah.
So that's all part of the Cult of Deception. That is the human aspect of the Labyrinth. Whereas the Labyrinth is the socio-cultural physical aspect. The Cult of Deception is the human aspect, her dealing with other characters and how these characters are treating her and misdirecting her or redirecting her, misleading her, or upholding a deception of some kind. The early name for this was going to be the Masquerade. You can almost picture the heroine moving from one dancing partner to another. They all have masks, and she's trying to ascertain the truth. Who's reliable in here? Who is who they say they are? Is that just a facade? What's real? That's what the heroine is trying to learn in this early phase of exploration. There's a lot of things that just aren't what they seem.
Yeah, and we, the beginning of Aliens, we've got parts of the movie that feels like it's real and then turns into a dream, maybe, because she has those nightmares. It's really
Weyland
really
Yutani is the Cult of Deception in Aliens, and I guess also in Alien, there's a hidden agenda that the heroine is not privy to, and then learns and discovers in her Act 2 phase. So there is a Cult of Deception in all of these things. So heroines quite often have layers of their culture that where there's a lot of secrets. There's hidden doors, trap doors, hidden or mysterious objects. Quite often that she's trying to get to the truth of it. She's in that exploration phase.
Moving on, we got the Chambers of Knowledge.
So the next two kind of go together.
Okay,
they go together. In the Hero's Journey,
Chambers of Knowledge and the Chamber Guards.
Yes, the Chamber Guardians go kind of together. In the Hero's Journey, we have Threshold Guardians, and Threshold Guardians block the hero's departure from the native culture. They try to prevent him from leaving that home sphere into the special world. Heroines don't cross the threshold usually to leave the native culture. They go into the inner chambers of society or the chambers of knowledge. As they go deeper they will enter a room or a space, and once you see it, you'll notice it everywhere. When a heroine enters this space, there's often another person in this room. Oddly enough, the most typical, and that's why I have it in the graphic, there's some barrier between her and this character, usually a desk. They enter this chamber, and there's the Chamber Guardian waiting for them. It's an archetypal confrontation. The Chamber Guardian isn't a belligerent sentry like the Threshold Guardian, who's physically blocking the heroine's departure. Chamber Guardians are more like administrative tricksters. When the heroine enters the space, the Chamber Guardian often issues a social test to the heroine that the heroine must pass. A puzzle, a trick, a social test of some kind that the heroine must do. She's there to get information. There's often an exchange in this place. and that's where the social test comes in. She will not get the exchange with the chamber guardian unless she passes the test.
So cool.
Right, Coraline. There's she goes into Spink Enforceable, and then she goes into the Amazing Babinski, and then the other mother chamber is in there waiting for her. And there's a chamber guardian in each one of these inner spaces. Silence of the Lambs. She goes in to find Hannibal Lecter standing there. Or actually, Dr. Chilton is the first chamber guardian. He's behind a desk. He hits on her. She has to get around that to get him to bring him to Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal Lecter's in the next chamber. He's like, look inside yourself. He gives her like a riddle to solve. And then she goes into the yourself storage bay, right? And there's that guy there. He won't open the door for her. So these chamber guardian events are very specific things, and the chambers themselves are often very archetypal. They're filled with imagery that are one subset of knowledge. Again, in Silence of the Lambs, like entomology. There's all these butterflies and caterpillars in the room, and there's the chamber guardian. She's got to figure out what this moth is. So on and so forth. In Wizard of Oz, although it's outside, she recruits each chamber guardian. She recruits the Scarecrow. She recruits the Tin Man. She recruits the Cowardly Lion. So it's a very different type of journey.
Interesting, yeah. She recruits them. That's cool.
And there's a test there. There's usually a little test or a riddle for her to solve in each of the chambers. And there's, like I said, there's usually an exchange of some kind. The heroine gets something and the chamber guardian gets something in return. So anyway, you'll see these exchanges quite often in these chambers of knowledge. As a writer, it's fun to build out that chamber. Make it as dreamlike and archetypal as you can. Put the chamber guardian right there behind a desk or a barrier of some kind, and have this sort of exchange between them for the heroine to advance. This isn't just fun. The heroine, since she's dealing with her native culture, the native culture always seems to have an upper hand on her. These little social tests is where the heroine is sharpening her social skills. She's overcoming these little social tests. Pretty soon she'll know how to overcome most of them. By the end of the story, the modes of enforcement by the native culture will start to work less and less because she's learning. She's sharpening her skills in these inner chambers.
Okay. Yeah. Then we get to the center here.
Right. So this is where you get it. This is the center part of the story. There's a little shift. This is where she begins to gain power in the labyrinth. She's been kind of at a disadvantage for most of Act 1, in parts of Act 2, and here's where things start to shift, and you can see the shift in her heroic partners. So we'll start with the first one, the Beast is Ally. This one's very obvious. You see this character everywhere.
Yes.
They're usually it's a heroic partner for the heroine. This is the heroine's version of the knight in shining armor. So the hero sees himself as a knight in shining armor. He's very, obviously brave and valiant and heroic. The heroine rarely sees him this way. She often sees the Beast as Ally as just as off-putting, just as menacing, just as dangerous as the masked Minotaur. In fact, the Beast as Ally is often a doppelganger of the masked Minotaur. This is a bizarre structural phenomenon in which this character often is like a twin. There's something very similar between these two characters. Terminator. In Terminator 2, they're both the Beast is Ally is Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's an exact clone of the masked Minotaur from the first film. Now he's showing up to help her. The masked Minotaur, as we said, is the T-1000. They're both on one side of Sarah Connor's the T-1000. On the other side is the T-800. They're mirror images, but one is helpful, one is destructive. The key difference with the Beast as Ally is that the Beast as Ally often adopts the heroine's cause. It's amazing. He doesn't just become her friend and helper. He picks up her flag and carries on. He's all in. In Game of Thrones, Khal Drogo. There's this great scene with Khal Drogo, who is the Beast as Ally for Daenerys. He's very beastly. He's barbaric. He's menacing. And then he rejects his own mission and takes up the heroine's cause. He's going to help her win back the throne. Han Solo and Luke Skywalker are just wanting to fight. It is Princess Leia's cause that we are introduced to in that film, A New Hope.
Yeah,
She comes rushing into the story. It's not Luke. Luke doesn't even show up for 17 minutes. It is a heroine story for the first 17 minutes. She comes, and Han and Luke both adopt Princess Leia's cause.
they do.
Yes, the key difference between the Beast as ally, so I'll read the thing. The Beast as ally often exhibits antisocial or nonconformist attitudes toward the native culture. They're disruptive people usually. Because the heroine is also struggling with the native culture, she finds this individual intriguing because he's bucking the system. She's like, I made a captivity bargain. This guy's like, the hell with that. You know, he's very antisocial. So she finds that interesting. The Beast is often protective of the heroine. The Beast is often a doppelganger or mirror image of the masked Minotaur. Silence of the Lambs. On one side of Clarice is serial killer Buffalo Bill, the masked Minotaur. On the other side is serial killer Hannibal Lecter helping her along. So it's phenomenal. In that new movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, the masked Minotaur is her daughter, who is seeking to annihilate herself and her relationship with her mom. And on the other side is the other family member, her husband, Wayman, who's also seeking a divorce. He's also seeking to sever a relationship with her. So there's always this mirror image there. The Beast is also drawn into the attractive force of the heroine's sacred fire, and he also, or she, may also attempt to capture it at first. Like the Minotaur, the Beast may also have an animal totem, like Buffalo Bill. Han Solo has the Millennium Falcon. You know, there's sometimes these animal totems to give you a clue that he's also half animal, half man. But the difference is the Beast's humanity is dominant in him, whereas the Minotaur, it's the animal side that is dominant. That's the difference.
Yeah.
So the Beast almost always adopts the heroine's cause. The Beast as ally signals the heroine's growing mastery of the labyrinth, because here's someone who's buying into her. And many heroines form a bond with the Beast as a form of bridge building. Beauty and the Beast is a classic example of the bridge building phenomenon between a heroine and this barbaric type of character who ends up adopting her cause. So the Beast he ends up honoring the sacred fire of the heroine. That is something the Minotaur cannot do. The Beast can. So the Beast will surrender his claim to the heroine's sacred fire and honor her. And that's why he becomes a heroic partner and not a possessor. Whereas the masked Minotaur will, when that moment comes, he will not give up that claim. He will ratchet it up and go even stronger after her. So that's the Beast as ally. And these are great. She is a great heroic partner of the heroine. So
now in a movie like or the story, The Wizard of Oz, who would you say would be the Beast's ally?
Well, I think the overt one is the Cowardly Lion. He's an actual beast.
So it could be overt or subtle.
What's that?
It could be overt or subtle. The Beast's ally.
So I think it's the Cowardly Lion because he is because he fits the model. He has a veneer. Remember when he first meet? He's like. He's like pretending to be like fearsome and everything, and then she finds out, oh, you're just a pushover.
Yeah, she figures him out real quick.
Right. So the Beast. The trick is
interesting.
The Beast's outer menacing appearance is his disguise. He's actually very human, but he disguises himself as something else that he's not. Do you think it brings that out of him?
And do you think it's always necessary for them to kind of like not like each other quite in the beginning, or be at odds at first and then turn around? Or
I do. I think because the Beast is also not who he says he is. So the heroine she knows about this behavior from masked Minotaurs.
Okay.
So when she meets someone else who seems to be not who he says he is, she's gonna be on guard with this guy. Secondly, this guy is usually a little off-putting in some way, but this will change as they build the bridge with each other.
Yeah.
Aliens is another good example. We really discussed it. Bishop is the Beast as ally in Aliens, And think about it. He's a doppelganger. He's an android. On the other side is Ash. He's also an android. He's the masked Minotaur from the first film. And she doesn't like Bishop in the beginning.
Yes.
So there is a clash there. Because she sees the Beast as being quite similar to the masked Minotaur. And but when push comes to shove, like in Beauty and the Beast will surrender his claim to the hero in sacred fire, even if it hurts him. The Minotaur will not. And you see this all the time.
Yes.
In these stories.
Yes. Wow. So, that is so good.
The Beast becomes a great ally, a great heroic partner of the heroine. The second is the fragile power. This is some people's favorite archetype. The fragile power is fascinating. The fragile power also becomes a heroic partner, but the heroic partner is, or the fragile power. Here's the image for it in the book.
There we go. Oh, he's so cute. Oh, the fragile power.
So the fragile power is exactly that. Something that looks small and not helpful, not useful. The fragile power is usually a physically smaller character, stigmatized, weakened, overlooked, or childlike, whereas other characters often dismiss, ignore, or reject the fragile power when encountered. Heroines often show skepticism toward negative assumptions based on an outward appearance. This is becoming an issue for the heroine. She doesn't like that they're judging this small character as useless. Heroines defend the fragile power in their story world and often entrust them with critical responsibilities. I interpret this as the heroine has felt this way. People have dismissed her. They have not taken her seriously, and she doesn't like that. So when she encounters a fragile power, she sees an opportunity to flip the script. She's not going to be dismissive. She's going to treat this fragile power as valuable. And the heroine is often rewarded for this trust in this small character. The fragile power often activates in the end part of the story to save the day. In Aliens, Newt is the fragile power. When the Marines are finally cornered and have nowhere else to go, and the aliens are knocking down that door, and Vasquez is like, whatever you're going to do it fast. It is Newt who activates. She finds the secret door, and it is Newt who leads the battle-hardened Marines to safety inside a labyrinth of ventilation shafts. Newt, the one who's like, they thought she was useless, just a useless, traumatized child. That's not what Ripley saw. Ripley took the time to invest in Newt, and she trusted Newt to lead them out of there, and she did. Toto is the fragile power in The Wizard of Oz. Yes. He's the one who unmasks the Wizard of Oz. It's him. Pull back the curtain. In Star Wars, A New Hope, we said it starts with a heroine-centric story. R2-D2 is the fragile power. He's small and childlike, and she gives the Death Star plans to this droid, who then takes he takes this mission from his heroine very seriously, and he goes and delivers this message to Obi-Wan Kenobi. In Return of the King, Mariotic Brandybuck is the small little hobbit, and the king is like, you shouldn't go on the battlefield. They're laughing at him. His arm's not long enough to even fight in the Lady Éowyn is like, why can't he fight for who he loves? And she brings him onto the battlefield. Huge, huge trust right there. And when she's fighting the Witch King, it's Mary who stabs him in that moment, and the Witch King looks away, and that's when Éowyn delivers the fatal strike. So these fragile powers are all Princess Leia in Return of the Jedi. She encounters little Ewok, right? Yes. And then suddenly the Ewoks lead the counterattack against the Empire. Pretty important moment. The heroines do this all the time in their stories. So between the Beast as ally and the fragile power, you have two heroic partners often flanking the heroine, who end up saving the day and doing quite a lot of good. I call it the feminine triad in my book. I call it the great battle formation of the heroine, the feminine triad, the Beast as ally, the fragile power, and the heroine in the center. They're a formidable force.
So the three characters are just sort of the team that you put together.
You'll see them at the end of the story. So at the end of Aliens. Bishop, the Beast's ally, he's right there. He came in pretty handy. There's Newt, the fragile power. In Terminator 2, you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Beast's ally. Then you got John Connor, the fragile power, sitting right there. So these heroines, these are the characters that make it to the finish line, usually with the heroine.
Now, can you have multiple Beast's ally or fragile powers?
Yeah, Twilight has two. You have Team Edward, Team Jacob. Those are two Beast's allies. They're both dangerous. The one is an actual werewolf. He's actually a big bad wolf. Or in the book, I call him the big good wolf. And then you've got the vampire. They're both dangerous, right? But they have to be able to control that animal impulse, right? They're half animal, half human. The heroine wants to see that the Beast's ally can control that. That's a big deal to her. And that's what Beauty and the Beast, same thing. Get yourself under control. You know, if we're going to work together, you got to be able to. And the Beast cares enough to cross that bridge with her and to honor more of his human half. And the Beast was his disguise. The Beast is the disguise for the Beast's ally. The humanity is the disguise for the masked Minotaur.
Ooh, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, now this is probably my second favorite part is the broken truce.
Yeah, the broken truce. She holds the flag up high and the sword idle. So this is when the heroine breaks her captivity bargain. She's not going to mess around anymore. She's not playing nice. She knows that it was a bad deal now. She has help. She's got people that are going to work with her. And she has decided, she has come to a point where she's not going to do what others tell her to do, even if she's appearing to conform. This is an open act of nonconformity. And let me tell you, the native culture takes this very seriously. They will come after her. You will see this all over in heroine-centric stories. The broken truce. And you see the icon in the spiral there is a police car.
Oh, okay.
I can't tell you how often some aspect of either the villagers with pitchforks or law enforcement come rushing after the heroine. They come rushing after her.
Thelma and Louise,
Thelma
right?
and Louise.
Yeah, yeah.
Mad Max, Fury Road. The whole thing is the broken truce. That's the premise of the movie. The entire native culture comes roaring after her. They're not letting her go. Wreck-It Ralph. Vanellope. Remember, there's the eclair and the donut. The cops. They come after Vanellope, and the next scene of her is in a jail cell with chains all around her neck. She's being held, she broke the truce.
Yeah.
And the native culture says, you're done. Star Wars opens with a broken truce. You see Princess Leia with the sacred fire of the rebellion in her hand, which is symbolized by the Death Star plans. And she's running from her native culture in a broken truce. Behind her is the giant Star Destroyer. It even looks like a masked Minotaur, the head of the Star Destroyer.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's bearing down on her.
Yeah.
So it's a heroine moment. She's broken the truce. She was a member of the government.
Yes.
Now she's a refuge. She's a renegade. She's escaping her native culture.
Yeah.
To start Star Wars.
There's another movie that comes to mind, Legend of Billie Jean. Have you ever saw that one?
No.
Oh, well, yeah, you should see it. It's a heroine story for sure. And the police are after this girl, my goodness, and her brother. It's really good.
I'm gonna have to watch it.
Yeah, do watch it. It's really good.
Yeah, this bizarre pursuit is usually the key. It's usually law enforcement or villagers, but it's this weird pursuit of the Barbie. The Mattel guys come chasing after her in this comical way, but it's the same thing. In Labyrinth with David Bowie. Remember, she's running from house to house as the villagers are trying to chase her down. But it's a pretty big moment because this is where you are ending Act 2. She's not just exploring anymore. She's made a call, and this is her effort to start to break free of the labyrinth. And you see that she is in the spiral. She is coming out. She is trying to come out. And she's doing it with her two heroic partners with her.
We're going into Act 3. Anything that you want to say about Act 3 in general? Or? Yeah.
So Act 1 was immersion or orientation, and Act 2 was exploration. Act 3 is called permutation or rearrangement. Act 3 usually ends with the labyrinth being rearranged in some way. It's a fascinating aspect of this story structure. Where the labyrinth was in the beginning, it will change. It will change by the time we get to that broken spell.
Oh,
But
wow.
this is the beginning of that change. The heroine is now in defiance of the sociocultural labyrinth. The truce has been broken, and the native culture is not effing around. Usually, the masked minotaur is mustering social forces against the heroine. Beauty and the Beast, the villagers, kill the beast. They're coming in.
Yes.
So the heroine now is dealing with this kind of pursuit, her effort to escape. And so when you start Act 3, and this is amazing, we encounter the masked minotaur's strategy for recapturing the heroine, which is the poisoned apple. Okay. And the poisoned apple is an attack upon the heroine's free will. It is an effort by the minotaur to subdue, capture, and restrain the heroine by force, if necessary, in order to reconvert her or to have her re-enter a captivity bargain. The other thing about the poisoned apple is, so you obviously think of Snow White, right?
Yes. I was just going to mention that.
Her. Now, remember, that's the masked minotaur. She's in disguise, as we've come to expect. She is delivering this apple. Snow White takes a bite, and she falls unconscious. Yeah. The unconscious heroine is almost always associated with this moment. You'll see the heroine asleep, disoriented, restrained, with the masked minotaur hovering nearby. Secondly, the poisoned apple is something internal. This is bizarre. There is a sexual connotation here, okay? But it holds up on an archetypal level. You see some sort of entry, something like a syringe in Sarah Connor.
Oh, okay, yes.
You remember she's like, you got to let me see my son. And they hold her down and they inject her. And you see the heroine, like always, unconscious and restrained in that creepy scene where that guy licks her. Remember?
Yes.
She's restrained. She's unconscious. Beatrix Kiddo, she's unconscious. And you see Daryl Hannah, she was going to inject her with something. When Darth Vader does capture Princess Leia, the mind probe comes in. And there's a little syringe there. In Hunger Games, the Tracker Jackers sting Katniss Everdeen and she becomes disoriented. In Kill Bill, also at the end, she makes it. She's going to fight him. What does he do? Pulls out a tranquilizer gun and knocks her out. Those are poisoned apples. You see this everywhere. The poisoned apple as an archetype, usually delivered by the masked minotaur, delivered through premeditation and in bad faith, often in disguise. So the Minotaur's crossing a line here, which is further proof to the heroine. This is not a bargaining situation. This is a struggle for your own sovereignty, a struggle to the end. Knocks out, disorients, or disables the heroine. The poison is something internal, either ingested, injected, implanted, embedded. And if it's a robot, like a robotic woman, like in Westworld, it's programmed into her, a forced shutdown to turn the heroine off and switch her off. Usually includes a restrained, unconscious, or debilitated heroine. Often depicts a menacing figure hovering above or nearby the heroine. Usually precedes a failed attempt to convert the heroine or persuade her to accept a new captivity bargain. The Minotaur often tries to extract, steal, diminish, or destroy the heroine's sacred fire. You see this all the time. What is Vader doing when he's trying to get the Death Star plans out of her? That's her cause. That's her sacred fire. She'll never give that up. In Maleficent, Stefan poisons her with a poisoned apple. What does he take? He takes her wings, her symbol of freedom, from her. He puts them on her wall. He steals that from her without her consent. In Aliens, the face hugger is a poisoned apple. It's internal. It delivers something internal. It's the unconscious heroine who's often laying down and restrained. She's asleep when Burke delivers it. He's the masked minotaur of Aliens. And this thing would literally poison her by impregnating her. It's actually forced insemination, which was the symbolic aspect of the face hugger. And I think it's the symbolic aspect of the poisoned apple. The poisoned apple often places a special focus on the neck and throat or eyes and mouth. The eyes in that she looks entranced, like in Hunger Games when she's disoriented, or in Sleeping Beauty when there's another one, a needle. She pricks her finger on the needle.
Yes.
And she's entranced. Or Star Trek 1, Ilea, the throat. She's taken by the Minotaur, which is V'ger. He converts her, and she has that symbol on her throat, and her eyes are glazed. That's a poisoned apple attack.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So,
I see, and I'm really glad that you're explaining this, because I wouldn't have thought about that in that particular case with V'ger. But yes, it is. I mean, what else could it be?
We see her when Spock goes out into V'ger on his own in the spacesuit. Think about the imagery. It's so archetypal. First off, Ilea is like the size of a goddess. She's massive, and all they focus on is that apple red sensor on her throat. And she's unconscious, the unconscious heroine. And when Spock tries to touch it, it knocks him out. It's too much for him.
Yeah.
So anyway, the poisoned apple is a big deal because it also is an unequal attack. It's an attack of deception. Adam and Eve. You have the beast in disguise, and the serpent gives her the apple. And my point was, it's not a moral test that Eve fails. We have to understand that the apple is a weapon, and it is an attack upon the heroine. That is what a poisoned apple is.
Interesting. Yes.
Yes. She must be deceived into it. Poisoned apple is huge, and you do see it everywhere. Even in Alien, she unmasks Ash, right? She's in the inner chamber, Mother. She gets the exchange. She finds out the crew's expendable, and who occupies that space? Ash, right away. She unmasks him, and Ash throws her. What does Ash do? He rolls up a magazine and puts it in her mouth. So again,
I was like, what is going on there?
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
But it holds up the archetype, a special focus on the neck, throat, eyes, or mouth. And it's internal. So it's weird, and it's delivered by the Minotaur, and she's unconscious in that scene, or semi-conscious. So that's another expression of the poisoned apple. The poisoned apple is also that point of no return. So the next archetype is the point where the heroine realizes the only way to defeat the Minotaur is to do one thing. You can't just slay the Minotaur. Because if you attack this Minotaur while the mask is up, you look like the problem. You just attacked You just attacked our science officer. You just attacked the president. You just attacked, whoever the good guy is supposed to be.
Yes.
The heroine learns the truth. You have to unmask this character. And the unmasking is a critical moment. And in fact, it's almost more important than the battle itself in some stories. Some stories, they almost skip the battle. Like in Tangled, she finally unmasks Mother Gothel. Mother Gothel just falls back out the window. The battle wasn't much of a battle. Even in Kill Bill, which was a combat-centric heroine story, she just does that move on him. Battle's over. We have all these other big combats, but the climax was very simple. It was the unmasking of Bill that was the most important part. And I like how the filmmaker, you don't even see Bill's face in the whole first movie. That's how disguised he is.
Oh, yeah.
So the unmasking is where the mask comes off of the Minotaur. For this to work, she must be able to have witnesses. It must be incontrovertible proof. And it removes the core deception of the Labyrinth. The core deception is that the Minotaur is good. It's that simple. That's the core deception. When the mask comes off, the core deception collapses. And everyone sees the truth. The Minotaur is bad, is evil. And that one thing causes the entire cult of deception to collapse. Because all of the lies in the Labyrinth are based on the one core belief that the Minotaur is good. That's it. The Minotaur is good. Once the Minotaur is proven to be not good, all the other lies can't hold up anymore.
Yeah.
All of them come down at once. That's the power of the heroine's unmasking of the Minotaur. What's cool is I made a list of all the masks in heroine-centric stories.
Ooh.
Guess what the greatest type of mask is in heroine-centric stories? A human face. When I made a list of all
yes, of course.
when I made a list of all the best masks in stories, they were, Predator, Captain America, Boba Fett, Hannibal Lecter, Spider-Man, Jason. These are all very different from the types of villains heroines run into. Heroines, the disguise is their goodness. It's a human face. So when the heroine finally unmasks them, they give the culture, the native culture, the Labyrinth, a chance to change their opinion about the Minotaur. In Labyrinth, remember, he's like, I'll be your slave, Sarah. That's a different, he's lying to her.
Yes.
The heroine unmasked the Minotaur by revealing the hidden forms of tyranny and ego. Unmasking breaks the core deception of the story that the Minotaur is good. The pleasing human face of the masked Minotaur is actually ugly, deformed, tyrannical, or animalistic. The unmasking may be the climax of the story. The unmasking does not require combat-style showdown, but you can, and may result in the villain reforming. The villain might turn good in this moment.
Oh.
So Moana.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, Moana has the reformed villain in it. So that's the unmasking. And then the next archetype is actually pretty profound. And this is one of the centerpieces psychologically to the heroine's labyrinth. In the hero's journey, usually the final battle takes place far away from home. On the Death Star, it's on there. It's on the enemy's turf usually. And it's not a friendly place. In hero-centric stories, amazingly, the final confrontation takes place in a house, in her house sometimes, in the place she started, sometimes in the center of the labyrinth. Beatrix Kiddo's final battle takes place in a nice residential house where Bill is there, the Minotaur, and the Fragile Power is there, her daughter. Silence of the Lambs takes place in a house. Rapunzel, she ends up in that tower room, and that's where the final climax takes place. I think this is profound because home as battleground is psychologically traumatic. The home itself is often the center of the heroine's labyrinth. The invasion of the inner sanctum signals that even the safest places have been compromised by the Minotaur. If a final confrontation occurs, it takes place on familiar ground within a home or in a home-like environment. The symbolic meaning behind home as battleground is a contest of the heroine's will against the Minotaur's power. The confrontation is usually against the unmasked Minotaur, who becomes animalistic and tyrannical in full. So a lot of these Beauty and the Beast, it's in the mansion.
Yeah.
They're literally laying the mansion to siege. There's something psychologically disturbing about being in a safe place and having it completely invaded.
Yes.
So I think that's why Terminator 1 was so unbelievable, because home as battleground is on steroids in Terminator 1.
Oh, yeah,
So first off, we see the first attack on the first Sarah Connor, who's not her, not Linda Hamilton. She answers the door. Boom! It's a home invasion.
Yes.
He enters the home and he shoots her. We find out through the news that the other Sarah Connor in the phone book, someone shot her in her apartment. So even though they're not these are home invasions. The next thing, he invades Sarah Connor's house, kicks open the door. He finds her roommate there. He invades that inner space. He kills the roommate and the boyfriend. Yeah. Sarah then goes into a safe place. What is her advice? Go to a public place. So she does. Does this help her against this masked Minotaur? He compromised. He goes into tech noir. He opens fire. He doesn't care. Yeah. It's terrifying because this should be a place of safety for her.
Yes.
And then it gets worse. So then you see the images of the broken truce. The police are pursuing Sarah at some point. She ends up in the police station, the safest place we can think of in 1984. She finally does what no heroine does. She goes to the police. She's protected there. These guys are armed. They're like, don't you worry about a thing. The Terminator invades this safe space too. Yes. He comes smashing through the police station and he kills 17 cops and runs her out of even the police station. So the Terminator is famous in the first movie for his ability to invade all the safest places. It does not matter where Sarah goes, he will invade that space. Anyway, and the final battle for Ripley is on the Sulaco. she made it back to the ship. She's safe. Yes. Nope. You're not safe. You have a queen alien about to descend on you. So home as battleground is a pretty big deal. You'll find a lot of our heroines are fighting on their home turf when this happens. And I think that means it says something very important. Remember, Sarah in Labyrinth is at home, technically.
Yeah.
And she's going to save her baby brother.
Yeah, and she could be, all of the labyrinth and everything that's happening could be happening right in her own brain.
Right.
Same as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
That's
So,
right. Gone with the Wind. Scarlett O'Hara kills one person. It's a Union soldier who does what? He invades her home. She shoots him. So there's a home invasion there. This invasion of the inner sanctum, the compromising of home, is a powerful archetype that the heroine must confront. And it is a terrifying thing. Her home becomes unsafe.
yeah,
And this
yeah.
leads to one of the most heroic moments in all of storytelling, the Shield Maiden.
Yes.
This is one of my favorites. I've gotten emotional now when I see it because it is so powerful and recurrent.
I love it too.
Yes. The Shield Maiden. And you'll be surprised by how often this happens. The Shield Maiden is when the heroine physically interposes herself between the masked Minotaur and a defenseless character, typically just a few feet away. Very important to understand the heroine in her battle. If there's a major confrontation, there's often a fragile power that shares the battlefield with her a few feet away. Hero's journey stories do not feature the second character nearby during their final confrontation. It's usually one-on-one, single combat that is resolved by great skill and ethical use of force, usually. The heroine has someone standing right there. Ripley has one of the greatest Shield Maiden moments of all time. The confrontation in the loader with the Queen Alien. Nuke is in that space. She's right there. She's right just a few feet away. And if the Shield Maiden fails, Nuke could be destroyed.
Yes.
So the heroine physically interposes herself between the Minotaur and a defenseless person. The heroine's body symbolizes a physical shield and a red line. The heroine draws a red line in the world, wherever this might be, and you can't cross this line. That is what the heroine says. She is the first and only responder and the sole enforcer of this red line. It's incredible. The heroine's primary goal is to block the Minotaur's advance. A defenseless person shares the room or space with the heroine, typically just a few feet away. The heroine intends to survive the confrontation, not sacrifice herself. Because if she dies, then the other person's going to die as well. The heroine risks severe physical harm, even if she's not trained for combat. The heroine often withstands all forms of retribution. So the Shield Maiden occurs almost everywhere I look now. Sarah Connor, the masked Minotaur, is advancing on John Connor. He shares the battlefield with her. She loads her shotgun. She backs this guy up. She's nose to nose with a T-1000, this indestructible force. She backs him up, backs him up, backs him up. There's a great scene in Avengers Infinity War. Thanos is there. He's batting aside Captain America. He needs one more Infinity Stone. It's Vision, who's lying defenseless on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Who's standing in between Vision and Thanos? A heroine, of course. It's the Scarlet Witch. It's a perfect image. You see her block Thanos. And Thanos is like trying to push forward. You have brutality in front. You have life behind her. And she tries to hold back this brutality by by shielding herself from Thanos. It's a perfect image of the Shield Maiden. In Return of the King, King Theoden goes down. He's on the ground. The Witch King of Angmar comes in for the strike. Who jumps in front of him? A heroine, Lady Éowyn. She's like, you will not touch him. And she ends up killing the Witch King of Angmar in this confrontation in order to protect her king. It's amazing. Wonder Woman, in that great scene where she's striding across no man's land, the army is behind her, and they open fire, and she raises an actual shield. She's the only target on the battlefield, and the German machine gunners are trying to shoot her down, and her knees are buckling. It's a great scene there with her. There's another scene in Game of Thrones where Catelyn Stark, for those who have seen it, her son Bran was paralyzed, so he's laying unconscious in bed. They send an assassin to come get him. She walks in, sees the assassin, sees Bran, leaps in front, grabs the blade with her hand, and wards off this guy's attack. And of course, there's a sad reminder that some shield maidens don't always win. In Conan the Barbarian, these cult warriors come in and they sack the village. Little Conan is standing there, and his mother does what? She raises her blade at these. She stands no chance. She raises her blade against these guys in an effort to protect Conan. Thulsa Doom delivers a poisoned apple here. He disorients her and then decapitates her. But the spirit, the feminine spirit, returns, because what happens at the end? Conan is about to receive a death blow, and Valeria comes back from the dead as a shield to block the blow. Well, you want to live forever, she says, and she saves him. So the Shield Maiden is stunningly persistent and frozen. The final scene, Prince Hans coming in, and Prince Anna or Elsa turns into a block. No, Prince Anna, right? Turns into a block of unbreakable ice. And her sister is just a few feet away, right behind her. And the sword shatters against the shield she makes. So A Quiet Place. Reagan, the daughter, she's deaf. The monster's coming up, and the mother pops up at the last second, empties the shotgun in this thing's face, and shoots it dead. Even in King Kong, there's that moment where the biplanes are coming in to shoot Kong off the Empire State Building, and Ann Darrow jumps in front and waves off, and these planes end up calling off that attack. So it's incredibly heroic, these heroines, what they do, but you'll start to notice it more and more as you watch these stories.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah.
It is. The Shield Maiden is freaking amazing. Yeah. So and then we get to essentially one of the last moments, which is the broken spell. And the broken spell is the rapid rearrangement of the native culture. The heroine has done something. You get a transition from darkness to light. You see the rapid rearrangement of the native culture into something better. So the heroine breaks the core deception of the Minotaur in the story world. The Minotaur is not good. The Minotaur is evil. The world or setting often experiences a rapid rearrangement. The transition moves from darkness to light. The imagery and symbolism highlight growth, life, color, and creation. The hidden victims of this labyrinth, of this world, are freed, and the Minotaur is either defeated or reformed. The broken spells are pretty dramatic in fairy tales. Swan Lake is a great example, but you'll see them even in modern stories. Wonder Woman, the second she breaks the spell from Ares, who's disguised, the world turns, the soldiers stop fighting each other. The spirit of war is broken. Even in Silence of the Lambs, she shoots Buffalo Bill, and the masked Minotaur collapses. The window somehow opens up and light pours into the basement, and the heroine has reclaimed the labyrinth. And by the way, in Silence of the Lambs, the Shield Maiden, Catherine Martin, the hostage, shares the room with her when she faces the masked Minotaur. So the broken spell is a pretty important thing. It's the evil that was plaguing the native culture has been dealt with by the heroine, and she changes the native culture either in a small way or, like in Hunger Games, overturns the whole social order to bring about freedom in the labyrinth.
So cool.
And then the final one is Atonement, and this is the heroine. Remember the captivity bargain? There was 3 claims to her sacred fire, which caused the conflict in the first place. You have the heroine's claim, you have the masked Minotaur's claim, and the native culture's claim. Atonement is the final reconciliation of all of that. The heroine has now done something that is incredible and useful and necessary for the native culture. And so the native culture has to deal with that. They have to change their opinion about her. In hero's journey stories, I feel like the hero attains worthiness at the end of his story. That is what he is subconsciously seeking. The hero is actually considered expendable by his native culture, and this bothers the hero on some level. We're sending you off to die. Save us. He's expendable. So when the hero slays the dragon, he's now proven that he's very valuable to the culture. That's I am not expendable. It's the hero's rally cry. He has now attained worthiness. That's why the native culture gives him this medal. That's why the bride might now be interested. He's worthy of her as a romantic partner. I don't think heroines are looking for worthiness in their stories in the Heroine's Labyrinth. What I have decided, what I've zeroed in on, is validation. The heroine was right about something that the native culture and others denied. They denied her this truth, and she stuck to her guns, and she proved to be correct. So the native culture must deal with that. They either apologize, you were right all along, I was wrong. They validate the heroine now.
Yeah.
The heroine's sacred fire is now honored. She no longer has to hide the sacred fire. She has fulfilled it. She has lived up to what she wanted. And the Masked Minotaur, his claim is surrendered because he has been defeated. So all of these claims to her sacred fire are reconciled. Moana's got a great reconciliation. The native culture wants Moana to be the chief. They take her up and say, this is the place of chiefs. You're going to put your stone up on top of the mountain, and you will take your place as our chief. Moana is like, I don't want to live on, I want to explore. That was her sacred fire.
Yes, sir.
And you know that because the sacred fire, when she finds the ships in the inner chamber, the fire symbolism appears. And so how does this get resolved? She takes her place as the chief, but as a seafaring people. She restored this old value to her native culture. They used to be explorers, and now she discovered that, and she's restored this. Now her native culture are going to be explorers again with her as the chief. And on top of the place of chiefs where she was supposed to put a stone, one of the final scenes is her conch shell, which is her symbol, one of her symbols in this story. So it's a perfect reconciliation.
Oh,
and then the only other reconciliation I think we should talk about is the heroine and the mother figure. I think this is going to take on a greater significance in stories as we move forward.
Okay.
A lot of stories omit the mother character because the relationship is complex. The mother figure often represents the native culture. Remember, the native culture wants the heroine to perpetuate something, to continue something.
Ooh.
Right? So when the mother agrees to be a mother, she is fulfilling what the native culture wanted her to do. So, and the native culture is something the heroine's fighting against. So that creates a natural tension between the mother figure and the heroine. You accepted this native culture deal, not me.
Yes.
So at the end, the heroine and the mother figure should try to reconcile this difference. You see it in Everything Everywhere All at Once. The mother and the daughter reconcile. In Barbie, you see the mother-daughter reconciliation at the end of Barbie. So, but you can see it in other ways, like in Silence of the Lambs. She's an oafish. The native culture grants her a real shield. She becomes an FBI agent. She's validated. She did it. So that's the atonement. The heroine has made a major impact, or has made some impact, big or small, in the native culture. There's been some sort of rearrangement, and she has been validated as knowing something and proving right.
Yeah, in Zootopia, something like this happens, right?
Oh yeah, with Judy Hopps. Yeah.
Yeah. This is wonderful. My goodness, and definitely, like you said, I've watched a lot of content with you explaining this, and every time you do, I learn a little something more about it, and feel like maybe after like 5 more explanations, I'll be an expert. But this is fantastic as far as like just seeing it all out, and just thinking of all of the different movies that I can recognize all of these facets woven inside and naturally occurring in these stories. It's just really cool.
So there is something the heroines have been doing that we may have mistaken by trying to think of it as a hero's journey. When she was on she was on an inward journey. Her challenge came from her native culture. There is a character that tries to possess and monopolize her. Heroes just don't seem to have that the same way. It's just a different style of a story. It's a different structure, and the archetypes are different.
Having these conversations about movies and storytelling, it's just so important because, I feel like the art form, maybe it's in danger, maybe it's not, but I think it is worthy of talking about. Some of the movies that have happened that inspire us to be better people, or just entertain us in general, give us that raw entertainment that we love and that we remember.
Totally.
And so
Why are we? I mean, why are we still talking about these movies 30, 40 years later? You know, there's a reason.
yeah,
There's a reason why these movies they did something. They touched us in a way,
yeah.
and why is your audience getting together, you know, routinely to talk with you and to join in the discussion? We're all moved by these stories,
Yes.
and the good ones are timeless and they don't go away. And you can talk about them 40 years later and still get so much out of them.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just amazing. Like this is giving us more
This should
nuance.
give people, a new lens through which you can understand a story, to where you can view the story and appreciate heroic actions. You know,
Yes,
I
yes.
actually see heroines very differently now. When I see a heroine, like when I was watching Everything Everywhere All at Once and Evelyn Wayne gets it, I was like, oh my God, the Shield Maiden, there she is. She's not letting this guy pass. And it's inspiring even to me. I'm like, man, these heroines, they have their own thing going, and it's just as inspiring, just as amazing.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Douglas. You're just incredible. Your knowledge of movies is vast, and how they're applying to the Heroine's Labyrinth is just really jazzing me up for like looking further into like, okay, where is it over here? Is it in this movie? All right, I'll be seeing you guys next time.
All right, everybody. See you later.
Right now, YouTube is going to suggest a video for you to watch. I urge you to do so because that will really help out the channel a lot. And I will be able to continue to make content a lot like this. Without further ado, I bid you adieu, and I'll see you in the next one.